Imagine being dragged from your home by armed men, your neighbors watching in silence as you're forced to the town square. Your crime? Speaking your mind. Your punishment? A horrifying metal cage locked over your head, with iron spikes designed to pierce your tongue if you dare utter a single word. This isn't fiction. This is the terrifying reality of the Scold's Bridle, one of history's most sadistic instruments of silencing women. And by the end of this video, you'll discover why this medieval torture device reveals something deeply disturbing about how society has always tried to control women's voices. The year is 1567. In the small English town of Congleton, a woman named Alice Curwen stands trembling in the marketplace. The townspeople gather around her, their faces a mixture of curiosity and cruel satisfaction. Alice had committed an unforgivable sin in the eyes of her community. She had argued with her husband in public, defended herself against false accusations, and worst of all, she had spoken with what they called a sharp tongue. The town magistrate steps forward, holding what appears to be a grotesque iron helmet. But this is no ordinary headpiece. The Scold's Bridle, also known as the Branks or Gossip's Bridle, is a diabolical contraption of metal strips and hinges that forms a cage around the wearer's head. Most terrifyingly, a flat iron plate extends from the front, designed to press down on the tongue. Some versions featured sharp spikes that would pierce the tongue if the victim attempted to speak. As the cold metal touches Alice's skin, she realizes her world is about to change forever. The magistrate explains to the crowd that she will wear this device for the next 4 hours, paraded through the streets as a warning to other women who might dare to speak out of turn. The lock clicks shut with a sound that seems to echo through centuries of female oppression. But how did we reach this point? How did society create such an elaborate and cruel method to silence women? The Scold's Bridle emerged during the late medieval period, around the 15th and 16th centuries, though some historians trace similar devices back even earlier. It was a time when society was rigidly hierarchical, and women were expected to be silent, submissive, and obedient. The concept of the scold, a woman who spoke too freely, argued too loudly, or expressed opinions too boldly, became a legal category punishable by law. The device itself was a masterwork of calculated cruelty, crafted by blacksmiths who took perverse pride in their work. Each bridle was custom-fitted to ensure maximum discomfort and humiliation. The iron framework consisted of a headpiece that locked around the skull, with a hinged face guard that could be secured with a padlock. The most sinister component was the bit mine, a flat piece of metal that sat on the tongue, often featuring sharp protrusions or spikes. Some versions included additional torments, bells attached to the top so the victim's every movement would announce their shame, decorative elements that mocked their crime, or extended bits that would gag the wearer completely. The wealthy could afford ornate versions with engravings, while the poor suffered with crude, roughly hewn iron that left rust stains and cuts on their skin. The psychological impact was as devastating as the physical pain. Imagine being unable to eat properly, drink water without difficulty, or sleep comfortably. Every swallow was agony. Every attempt to move the tongue resulted in fresh punctures. But perhaps most cruelly, the victim remained fully conscious and aware, forced to endure hours or even days of public humiliation while being unable to defend themselves or plead for mercy. The legal framework surrounding the Scold's Bridle reveals the systematic nature of this oppression. In England, being a common scold was an actual criminal offence, defined as a woman who disturbed the peace through her words. Notice how this crime was specifically gendered. Men who argued loudly or spoke harshly were rarely subjected to such punishments. They might face fines or brief imprisonment, but nothing approaching the calculated torture reserved for women. Court records from the period show the arbitrary nature of these sentences. Women were condemned for defending themselves against abusive husbands, for gossiping about local affairs, for expressing religious opinions, or simply for being too talkative. In 1653, Dorothy Wall was sentenced to wear the bridle in Carlisle for the crime of preaching Quaker beliefs in the street. Her own account describes the excruciating pain and the crowds who mocked her suffering. But let's step into Dorothy's shoes for a moment. Picture the rough cobblestones beneath your feet as you're led through the town centre, the weight of the iron pressing down on your skull. Every step sends vibrations through the metal framework, causing the spikes to shift against your tongue. You taste blood, metallic and warm, mixing with your saliva. Children throw stones and rotting vegetables while their parents laugh and point. You want to cry out, to proclaim your innocence, to curse those who torment you, but any movement of your tongue brings fresh agony. The social dynamics surrounding the Scold's Bridle reveal how communities policed themselves through fear and spectacle. The public nature of the punishment was crucial. It wasn't enough to simply silence the individual woman. The entire community needed to witness her degradation as a warning to others. Neighbors who might have secretly agreed with the victim's words learned to keep their own opinions to themselves. Women developed elaborate strategies to survive in this oppressive environment. They spoke in coded language, used intermediaries to express controversial opinions, or found subtle ways to resist that wouldn't attract the attention of the authorities. Some formed secret networks of support, though helping a woman sentenced to the bridle could result in similar punishment. The device also served economic purposes that historians are only now beginning to understand. In many cases, women who challenged property arrangements, business dealings, or inheritance decisions found themselves accused of being scolds. The threat of the bridle became a tool to maintain not just social order, but economic control. A woman who questioned her husband's business practices, or who spoke out against unfair treatment by employers, could find herself facing this horrific punishment. Religious authorities played a crucial role in legitimizing and promoting the use of scolds bridles. Biblical passages about women's silence were twisted to justify extreme measures against those who spoke out. Churches often blessed the devices and supported their use as instruments of divine justice. Some surviving bridles bear religious inscriptions claiming God's approval for silencing wicked tongues. The regional variations of the scold's bridle tell their own disturbing story. In Scotland, the device was called the branks, and often featured more elaborate decorative elements. Some Scottish versions included large iron frameworks that extended far from the head, making the wearer appear monstrous. In Wales, the tradition persisted well into the 18th century, with communities maintaining their bridles as treasured instruments of local justice. Archaeological evidence continues to emerge, painting an even grimmer picture of how widespread this practice was. In 2018, construction workers in Yorkshire uncovered a cache of iron bridles beneath an old courthouse, suggesting they were used far more frequently than surviving court records indicate. Each discovery adds another layer to our understanding of how systematically women's voices were suppressed. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn, and why understanding the scold's bridle matters today more than ever. By the late 17th century, something remarkable began to happen. Women started fighting back, not with violence or dramatic rebellion, but through the very tool that had been used to oppress them, their voices. The case of Anne Carter, in 1682, marked a turning point. Sentenced to wear the bridle for scolding her betters, Anne refused to submit quietly to her punishment. She had secretly learned to write, and from within her iron cage, she began composing letters that were smuggled out of town. Her words, describing the agony and injustice of her treatment, began circulating through underground networks of women. Anne's letters sparked something unprecedented: public questioning of the scold's bridle itself. For the first time, people began asking whether this punishment was truly just, whether it served any real purpose beyond cruelty, and whether a society that needed to torture women into silence was truly civilized. The decline of the scold's bridle wasn't sudden or complete. The last recorded use in England was in 1856, though some communities continued the practice informally for decades longer. What changed wasn't just the law, but public opinion. The very spectacle that had once entertained crowds began to disturb them. People started turning away from the parades of suffering women, and eventually they began speaking out against them. But here's the question that should haunt us all. What if the scold's bridle never really disappeared? What if it simply evolved, took new forms, adapted to new times? Today we don't lock iron cages around women's heads, but we've found subtler, more sophisticated ways to silence voices that challenge the status quo. Think about it. When women speak out about workplace harassment, how often are they labeled as difficult or attention-seeking? When they express anger about injustice, how quickly are they dismissed as emotional or hysterical? When they challenge male authority, how often are they told they're being aggressive or bitchy? The metal spikes may be gone, but the impulse to silence remains. As we close this dark chapter of history, remember Alice Kerwin, standing in that marketplace in 1567. Remember Dorothy Waugh, preaching her beliefs despite the pain. Remember Anne Carter, writing secret letters from within her iron prison. They were silenced, but their stories echo through time, reminding us that the fight for women's voices is far from over. The next time you hear a woman speaking out, challenging authority, or expressing an unpopular opinion, ask yourself, are you listening, or are you reaching for a different kind of bridle? What do you think? Have we really moved beyond the mentality that created the Scold's Bridle? Or have we just found more subtle ways to silence women? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story made you think differently about how we treat women's voices today, hit that subscribe button for more untold stories from history that still shape our world. Because sometimes, the most important voices are the ones someone is trying to silence.